freelance writer at the moment. I'm going to, first of all, let you into a secret that very few ideas in the workshops are original. They come from other people. Yesterday I was talking to Chris, who was speaking in this room next, was telling me this idea of standing on the shoulders of people and how little we do of that. I'd like to just reiterate what Nina was talking about in the last session, about inspirational teachers. And we get little bits of inspiration from lots of different people. So if I forget to accredit these sources, one or two of the ideas might be my own, but most of them come from other people. And so my job is really a regurgitator. Hopefully not in a very coherent way. I'm hoping that it will be coherent today. And then you get some ideas and then you can freshen up, liven up your teaching and scratch that itch that Nina was talking about in future classes with some of these ideas. This is a workshop, so I'm going to be asking you to do some work. Not a lot, but I can see, for example, if you feel like you're out on a limb or on your own, it would be nice to perhaps move and find somebody you're sitting with, because you will be asked to collaborate. Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. You can move over there. What's your name? Finbar. Nice name. Good name. Nice to meet you. Yes, there's a lady in pink there, but you're happy going to work with the people behind. Excellent. What's your name? Brooke. Good names. Very original names. Fantastic. Brooke and Finbar. Excellent. I met Manuel. Roisin I know. Anyone else, I'm sure I'll get to know you a little bit more as we go along. I will sometimes need to get your attention back. Although I have a microphone, I don't want to interrupt your speaking, so I will raise my hand when I want your attention. When you see me raise your hand, all you do is stop talking, raise your hand as well. Okay? The last one gets my laser pointer when they're on. Right, I'm going to show you something quite special that belongs to me. There it is. What do you think this could be?
Mirror.
Sorry?
Mirror.
A mirror. It's not a mirror. A frame. I'm more interested in what's inside the frame. A portrait? No. Oh, sorry. There we go. That's better. Well, it's not a portrait exactly. You're on the right lines.
You in a blizzard. You in a blizzard.
No, something in a blizzard, no. What is it? Is it a portrait? Is it a painting?
It's a space.
It's a space. It's not a space, actually. There's something there. Hope you see it. Sorry, Roisin. Is that better?
Oh yeah, it's an image.
Huh? It is an image. What kind of image is it? Not a lightning bolt, no.
It's what you want, isn't it? It's what you see.
It's what I want. What do I want? It's not a painting.
It's a drawing.
It's not a drawing.
It's a window.
It's not a window.
Photograph.
Hmm?
Photograph.
It is. It's a photograph. Very good. Very good. A very nice photograph. I hope you'll agree. This is a very special photograph to me. I wonder if any of you've got any questions about the photograph. Who is it? Well, who is it? No, who is it? That's the right question. Who is it? Well, as you can see, there are two people in the photograph. The older one is my brother. He's 2 years younger than me. He's about 38, but he was about 36 when this photograph was taken. And the other person is my daughter, Rosie, who is 6 in that photograph, and she's now about coming on for 9. Any other questions? Where are they? Well, we were on holiday there, and we rented a little house near my house in the south of Spain, and it had a swimming pool, and this is where the photograph is taken, in the swimming pool. It is in the summer. It's early summer. It wasn't hot every day. Any other questions?
This is a good photo.
I did take the photograph, and I'm quite proud of this photograph, because I think it's quite a nice one. They're in the swimming pool? Yes, they are. Any other questions?
What can you see besides?
Okay, well in the background you can see there are some sun lounges, that a swimming pool have the sun lounges, and then some trees in the background as well. Yeah. No, they're not planters. They're more like garden shrubs, garden bushes. Good.
She is laughing, but your brother not. What's up?
My brother's working very hard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she is. She is laughing. She's very excited. My brother is launching my daughter into the air from the swimming pool. Yes. Yes, fortunately she does. She learned when she was 4, so yeah, she can swim fine. Yeah, this wouldn't be a happy photograph otherwise. Any other questions?
Does he look like you?
He looks, well, a lot of people can see it. I can't. He's blonde and blue-eyed. So, from an obvious point, he doesn't. But other people say that we have similar mannerisms. But he's a lot fatter than me. I'm not that fat, am I?
Who did you share this picture with?
Well, I share my photographs on Picasa online because we live in Spain and my family lives in Britain. I send a lot of them, and we have a daughter, the granddaughter. We have a lot of photographs to share. So this photograph is actually online. Yeah, good question. Okay, that was my special photograph. I'm going to ask you to think about your special photographs. Where do you keep them? Where are your photographs? Do you have them online? Do you have them in an album? Does anyone keep an album anymore? Sorry? Not anymore. What's your name? Joanna. What do you do, Joanna? What do you do with your photographs?
Well, now I actually just have them on my computer or on my phone.
Okay.
When I was a kid, we quoted pictures, when I was a kid.
Yeah, okay. What about in your house? Have you got any photographs in your house? Where are they? Yeah? In the sitting room. Do you have, is it a very formal sort of setting with framed photographs? All over the place. Very good. And photos of family, presumably, yeah? And what about other people? Do you have a special place in your house for photographs? In your head?
Yeah, because I move often, so I cannot take everything with me.
Right. So you just, how do you keep them in your head?
Yeah.
Like a filing system?
Yeah. Make photos with my brain.
Yeah, interesting idea. Making photos with your brain. We'll be talking about that in a minute. Okay, I'd like you to think about, to choose one special photograph of yours. Okay, it might be a family photograph, or maybe something, a photo that you've taken that you're proud of, maybe a place that you're particularly fond of. I'd like you to think of that now, okay? Just choose one photograph. Once you've got that, I'd like you to draw it. I don't want you to draw it in detail. I want you to draw it like that. So if it's a photograph that's a portrait photograph, draw it like that. If it's a landscape photograph, draw it like that. And if you like, I'll show you, there's a neat trick. Do you know how to draw frames like this? It's a neat trick, I'll show you very quickly. You draw your rectangle. Draw your rectangle, and then if you start in the middle, just half a centimetre above the line, and go up, down, up. And go up, down, up. And do that on every side. Start in the middle, go up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up. There we go. And there's a beautiful frame. But you may have a no frame on your photograph. You may have a modern square frame. Maybe it's all blue. Okay, nice and big. Make it nice and big. Lovely, beautiful. See, can you just hold yours up? What's your name? Jose Luis. Jose Luis, can you hold yours up? Just show people what you've done. That's beautiful. Isn't that a lovely photograph? We'll be talking about that in a minute. Okay. If you've got your photograph, I'd like you now to show it to the people next to you. Maybe in 2s or 3s, it doesn't really matter. And I'd like the other people to look at the photograph and ask the questions like you asked me. Okay? You've got 3 minutes. Well, that worked. Good, thank you very much. Let's find out a little bit of information. The lady here with the purple jumper? Yeah. What did you find out about your partner's photograph?
Helen's photograph is all purple and the water. It's quite an old photograph. It looks nice and cute.
So Excellent.
And the thing is, it's not a posing photograph. They're not looking at the camera.
Right.
They're sort of running into the father. And it's caught on, she's holding his face. And he's looking very surprised. And she's looking at him, so she shows expressions.
I'd love to see
They're not
that.
going
It's
to-
a very, that sounds like a very special photograph for me. Where do you have it? Helen, is it?
Yes, in the living room, so there's a telly on it.
It's
I
like,
looked at it, you
right.
know, on this paper program.
What does your daughter study?
She's in Grenada, actually, first year.
Here in Madrid.
No, in
Let's have one more. Guy at the back of the ground. What's your name?
Gavin?
Gavin. Gavin, you talked to Rasheen, did you?
Yes.
Tell us about Rasheen's photo.
Well, it's a landscape from Ireland, from southwest Cork, where her family are from.
Okay, so a special place reminding you of home. Do you have a private place here in Spain?
on my phone.
It's on your phone.
My backdrop on my
It's
phone.
your desktop thing.
Yes.
Very good, very good. And why is that particular scene special? Is it just a
It's
general
the front
area?
garden. It's from the front garden, just goes out, looking over the sea.
And you see the hills in the background and
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
typical Irish sort of,
Very, very
what I
good.
imagine the South Island people. Very good. Excellent. Okay, so here we have an activity where we talk about photographs. I like this activity because it doesn't involve any preparation. If I forget to bring a photograph to school, it doesn't matter at all. I've got a bunch of photographs in my head to choose from. That's the first time I've talked about that photograph, although I've done this talk before. I had a different photograph last time. I love this idea of, what did you say? I can't remember, what was your description? Pictures in your mind.
My brain.
In your brain, yes. We've got these pictures in our brain, this huge database of images. The second one, an image is worth 1,000 words. We've heard that sentiment before, many times, I'm sure, no? Does it exist in Spanish? Yeah? Más que mil palabras. My problem with images in the classroom is that they tend to replace más que mil palabras. They replace the need to communicate. You see a photograph and you go, ah, yes. When you don't have the photograph, the words must come in, just as they did in your case. So, some of the ideas in this talk will be about withholding an image and not necessarily seeing it at all. Some of them will be about withholding the image and then letting the students see them after we've talked about them. But let's talk about them first. Okay? And it's this idea of mental imagery. Plato talked about it. We've got here an image on the screen of a bridge, and the idea that images link, using the metaphor of bridges. A metaphor is an image as well, which is very valuable in the classroom. Between linking the classroom and the real world. Obviously, images allow us to bring in the real world. So we've been to Ireland already in the last 5 minutes. We've met members of their family, and we've used images to do that, to bring that into the classroom. I think there's a great power behind images in ways of doing that. But also I'd like to talk about bridging this idea between the physical image and the mental image, between our visual perception and the visual what's the word? In our brains, this idea of storing images in our brains, the mental imagery that goes with that. Plato talked about this as a painter in our minds. The presence of a workman in our souls, a painter who paints in our souls, or he used the word souls, minds of. Pictures to illustrate the words which the writer has written. So in this case, he's talking about reading, isn't he? And the ability to then conjure up images in our mind. Going back to that first quote by Ira Glass, who played the fantastic This American Life. He's a radio presenter, and he often talked about radio being the most visual medium. Most visual. He's not saying it's also visual, he's saying it's the most visual medium. That in some ways, television does the work for us. Our visual faculties don't have to work. But radio, they do. They have to work overtime. And it's this idea of engaging. When I listen to the radio, I'm engaged in what I'm listening to, and images come to my mind, like a painter painting in my soul. What's very interesting is that in recent years, we've come a long way in neuroscience, with functional magnetic resonance imaging tools. We're able to see what goes on in the living brain as it's doing things, and they do tasks where they compare subjects actually looking at things and subjects imagining things. And in order to understand the findings, you need to think about the different parts of the brain. So you're probably aware that the frontal cortex and the parietal cortex up here, these are the bits that do a lot of the kind of more cognitive work about our own identity, about working things out, about awareness, consciousness. Meanwhile, our visual cortex is the occipital region, it's back here. Yeah? And that sort of processes the image. That sort of says, what am I looking at? It doesn't actually think about it. And obviously, when we're actually opening our eyes and looking at something, this is very busy, and so is this. Okay? And what's interesting is when you're imagining things, this is busy, and so is this. There's an overlap of the actual parts of the brain which are active. To a great degree. The overlap is particularly strong here. So obviously, your visual cortex isn't doing exactly the same as it would be if it was looking. So it's slightly different. There is some overlap, but it's not as great. But the overlap here is enormous. In what the findings suggest is that actually the act of imagining visually is tantamount to seeing. When we close our eyes and we say, I'd like you to picture in your mind an Irish mountain scene, rushing into front garden. And then you can see a fence, and beyond that I can see the trees, I can see the hills. There aren't any trees in that. There are not many trees in your view, are there? It's mostly moors and hills and things, is it?
There's the front garden looking out into the sea, and then there's a peninsula on the other side.
Okay, all right. Okay, so you can see the sea. Okay, we've got that image in our minds. What you're doing, what your brain is actually doing when it's imagining that and when you're actually seeing that are very, very similar indeed. So that just kind of goes, this idea of picturing in our minds, conjuring up ideas. Actually, it's true. The science says, actually, that is what we do. That is what happens in our brains. We are almost literally seeing things when we do that. I close my eyes, and obviously, if there is this overlap, you may find that it's more useful when you're imagining things to close your eyes. So, if you feel like closing your eyes in one or two of these activities, then feel free to do so. It makes sense. I'm going to talk about 3 ways of. There's the image. 3 ways of using images in the classroom. The first way is as a springboard, hence the image. Images can be a springboard into a lesson, into language. Okay? See, it's a good picture. This idea of launching the lesson, launching and engaging the students. We often use images to engage into a lesson, into a discussion, into an activity. And images are a very, very effective way of doing that. They activate, they get the neurons going in a certain theme or area, if you like. And the frame activity is a good it's a good idea that. I use that very often for various types of lessons. Can you think of any lesson aims that you might use this to start with? What might you be doing after this activity? So seeing this as a warmer, what lesson comes next? Used to. Used to, yes, yes, maybe well be. Maybe a past, looking at old photographs. Yeah, good. Question forms? Absolutely. It's a sort of test-teach test idea there, that you're actually getting them to do some question forming at the beginning of the lesson. Yeah, okay.
They could be practicing photographs and first certificate.
Photographs and first, absolutely. This is a photograph of, it shows in the background, all that sort of meta-language that we use to describe photos. Yes, very good.
Propositions, you don't ask someone to dictate the photo to another student, they have to draw their body on them.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, lots of ideas that I've not used before, so thank you. And I was thinking of also family vocabulary. Very often they are, family, it's a way into talking about family and thinking about family. So this is what I mean by springboard. It starts, it kicks off the ideas, it gets the juices flowing. Here's another very simple one. This is an idea from Jane Arnold, who you may have heard of or heard indeed. And Jane, she's got a book, I think I've got a reference for it at the end, about mental imagery. And for this you'll need a piece of paper. And that's it, no pen. Okay? And I'd like you to hold paper in your hand. This piece of paper is your front living room, your lounge. Living room. Okay, so I'd like you to stand at the door of your living room, please. Okay? I'd like you to walk over to the window. Okay, now go and sit on the sofa. Oh, you forgot to turn the television on. You go and turn it on at the mains, there's no remote. Very good. Okay. Go and check if that special photograph is in the place where it should be. Where are the photographs in your living room? Okay, now, is there any furniture you've got to walk around to get back to the door? Okay. Hopefully now you've got an image of your lounge in there, and like, I'm not going to do it because of time, but very similar to the photograph activity that you've already done, you could now show your lounge to your next door neighbour and talk about the furniture, the prepositions, etc., etc. And that's it. That's all you need. Again, no preparation. The image is in our minds. It's not a photograph this time. It's actually a real living space, but it's an image nevertheless. Of course, course books use images as a way of as springboards into lessons. I'd be very surprised actually if any course books these days, almost as the first activity on every page or every spread, there's not a photograph. The most common instruction for exercise 1, number 1, look at the photos, look at the map, look at the image. I write for Richmond Santiana, who kindly sent this to me here. And we've got one called The Big Picture, and images do feature, and I'm sure if I open any page, there's some photographs at the top. There's a lot of photographs sometimes. So this is the way of engaging our students into the lesson. It's a shortcut, isn't it? It doesn't involve more than look at the photos and answer these questions. Okay, I'm going to show you a page from the big picture, and there are 6 images, and I'd like you to think about what the lesson might be about. What might the lesson be about? Any immediate thoughts? About communication, you're looking at the keyboard there. Okay, communication's possibility. Work. About work. Hands are a feature, don't they? Yeah. Somebody said jobs. Jobs. Yeah. Okay, that could work. What would the people down here running do? What's their work? They don't look like top athletes. There's a couple of bit of swoopy going on there. Any other ideas? I think one of the problems with images is that we're very jaded by images, and we've learned over the years to expect this image goes with this. Certainly from a teacher's point of view and from a student's point of view, this image goes with this topic. And I think it's quite nice to turn that around and make it a little bit more surprising. So here we've got a guessing activity, which I think gets students thinking. I'm all in favour of that. The problem is, of course, when you open the course, but they can see the rest of the title. So you may want to scan and show it like this, to show them in this way. This is what it's actually leading to. Can you read that, okay? Somebody said, yeah? Dreams and ambitions. That's right. Dreams and ambitions. Let's go. Let's see if you can guess what the dreams and ambitions are. Just have a chat with your partner. Okay, so dream and ambition, direct a film, have a family, have a baby, money or something like that, yeah. Build your dream, build your house, okay, yeah. Run a marathon. Write a novel or something. Okay. So that's quite nice. I quite like to find images that perhaps surprise a little bit, or turn it around on its head a little bit, make us think a little bit more about what they're actually about, rather than just, here are 5 jobs. Okay, so Springboard is a very common way of using images in the classroom. But another way is as a centerpiece. If you think about a lounge or a living room, perhaps you've got one big picture, we've got a big picture there, but it's not in the center. But imagine if that picture was here. It's the centerpiece to the room. And images, in this case, the way I look at it is I think of the image perhaps on the floor in a big poster, or up on the board. And the students are all around it, and we're looking at it, and we're studying it, and we're talking about it, very importantly. We're working with the language that associates with it. And so in this activity, I'm going to show you a photograph of a place. Okay? But I'm only going to show you a little piece of that place, a small part. And you can fill in the rest yourselves. Okay, and I'm going to ask you some questions. This is one of those close your eyes moments, if you want to. But you've also got an image to look at, so you may want to open it for a minute to get started. Okay. Okay. So at the moment, you're very good group. Excellent. Okay. At this point, I would ask for some feedback. Just let's do quickly. Hands up. Who had? We were in the countryside. Hands up. Who said we were in the countryside? Yeah. What kind of countryside was it?
It was one of his state home,
Okay, so this was like one of those formal gardens.
yeah, like a terrace and a formal garden and more countryside in the background, basically.
Lovely. Yeah. Okay. In a town. You had in a town. Okay. You in a town. So where were we in the town? In a garden? Yeah. Someone's private garden? Or Palace garden, again, okay.
In a plant, a lemon plant.
In a public square? Now, obviously, there's a lot where we can go from here. There's a long way to go still. At this point, I think it would be a mistake to show a photograph to the students of where we actually are. I could show them, using today's technology, I could show them a panorama, we could actually have a video. But I'm not going to do that because I'd like them to provide it in the way that you've just had. You've described in some detail what people were doing. Did you have very different ideas? Did anyone have quite different ideas?
Yeah.
Yes? Brooke, was it?
No,
Joanna, sorry, Joanna. Brooks. That one, sorry. Joanna, what were the different ideas then?
Well, you're in a court, she was in a courtyard. I think, in the center of the city.
Okay.
She was in the town.
So very different in terms of noise levels, absolutely very quiet scene.
Yeah, but she said it was awesome. She said it was in the spring and it was summer.
Okay, all right, so lots of differences. Now notice how we're creating a sort of information gap. I'm sure you're familiar with this idea in the classroom of information gaps, the ability to, I've got some information which you don't have. Well, in this case, I've got an opinion which you don't have. And so we can compare and contrast those. So it sets up a high level of communication in the classroom. And I'm not going to give them the answer and stop that communication. It's the communication that I'm after. In this case, in the last one, we were talking about the different grammatical structures I used to, as a possibility for the family photographs. In this case, what are people doing? There's obviously present continuous. There's vocabulary to do with parks or the countryside or trees or whatever if we're practicing that. We can spend a great deal of time. So this is the centerpiece, and from this, a whole lesson ensues. I can imagine students writing descriptions by the end of it. I can imagine doing role plays where they're in that place having a conversation with two strangers at a park bench, possibly. There's a million and one different directions this could go. But at the centre of it all is this picture. The way this picture works, unlike the other one where we withheld the picture completely, in this case, what we've done is we've limited it. We've used a close-up. Okay? And that's another very effective way of encouraging mental imagery to kick in. I'd like to thank Kerry Jones, whose talk this originally was, who's a fellow writer, for this idea. She's a contributor to ELT Picks. Who's heard of ELT Picks? Just one person? Okay, well that's good. ELT Picks is a Flickr resource. It's an online resource. Oh, there's my question. It's a Flickr resource online. It's totally free. You don't need to sign up or anything. It's a bunch of photographs. Do you remember, if anyone's been teaching in ELT for more than 10 years or so, you'll remember the staff room box of photographs. We used to have one of these, and it had categories, you had animals and people and children and sports and buildings and things like that, and they were all categorised. It was generally a bit messy, and images were missing, and things like that. Well, this is an online version of that, and it's by teachers for teachers. So it's teachers that actually contribute to it. The more people that contribute, the better. I'm ashamed to say I haven't uploaded any photos, although I'm sure I could think of them. And we can see Kerry's picture actually is the paper picture for the close-ups. Okay? So you might be able to encourage different kinds of communication using different close-ups. Here we've got looking up. Looking up. I think similarly you're getting a very limited picture, but you can imagine from the very little information. Obviously there's some obvious ones. If you know anything about London, then you're going to be able to paint the rest of the picture. If you've never seen London, it becomes an imaginative exercise. But I'd rather go to more anonymous places. Where's this? Perhaps it's El Prado. Maybe it's probably not. I don't know where it is. But we can perhaps say I would say that's a museum, an art gallery. You might have your own ideas. So similar idea there. And notice the number of categories. A whole bunch of new bridges. How specific is that? So that's a really nice little resource there, from which you can build your own lessons on your own topics and themes. So if you just go to Flickr and look up ELT Pics, it's one of the groups, I don't know what it's called, it's a group or a club. All right? Any questions about that?
Yeah.
Yes, go on, Joanna.
When you use the, for example, you use it as a warmer, you use this as would you use a lesson with this or?
Good question. Good question. I mean, yes, you could use it as a starter, couldn't you? As a warmer, you could do a quick one, and then you could go into a grammar lesson about the present continuous. I can imagine that from that one photograph, a whole hour and a half. As I was suggesting before, with communicative activities based around that, descriptions of places, leading to who knows what. Okay. I think that's the nice thing about it, is it starts small but gets very, very big very quickly. And I think that's, and we'll talk a little later, is this idea that then that photograph triggers later on recall. We'll talk about the idea of memory, image of memory. Okay. And another centerpiece. And this is a Jamie KEDDIE idea. It's not his photographs, it's a photograph of mine. But it's a Jamie KEDDIE idea from his book called Images. And does what it says on the tin. Okay. I'm going to read you a description of a photograph. I'd like to listen carefully because there's a test afterwards. No notes. Pens down. Pens down. Okay. So this is a colour photograph. And it was taken in 1998 in Greece. I know it was taken in 1998 because it's got a little date, one of those photos with the date. We can see 3 young men sitting on an old boat, one of whom is me, aged 26, so many years ago. You can work out how old I am. I'm in the middle, and on my left is my younger brother, Josh, that you saw before. And on my right, so on the left of the photograph, is a guy called John, who we met on holiday. We're sitting on the brim of a boat with our feet inside the boat. We can see some of the old struts of wood under our feet, but many of them are broken. It's quite an old boat. In the background, we can't see much, just a few rocks on the floor. Okay. Josh and I are waving, but John is the only person smiling. Okay. Quick test then. Manuel, when was the photograph taken?
1998.
Very good. Where was it taken? Lady at the back there. Where? Where was it taken?
Greece.
In Greece, that's right. How many people are in the photograph? Lady with the coat on?
3.
3 people. Very good. You're good listeners. What are we doing? What are we doing, Olga?
Just having a trip on a boat.
Having a trip on a boat. Are we travelling on the boat? No. What are we doing? Jose Luis? You're sitting on the side of the boat, yes. And waving. All of us waving? No. How many people? 2. What was the name of the person who wasn't waving? Lady there. John or Josh? John was the one not waving. What was John doing, Roisin?
Smiling.
He was smiling, that's right, okay. How old was I in the photograph? Lady with the grey top. No, your friend, no, your friend. 20? 26, that's right, yeah, that's right. What can we see in the background? A few rocks. See, you didn't need your pen. Okay, very good. And what's the relationship between me and John? We're not strangers. Friends. We met a few days before. Okay, very good. Now then, this is what I would do with my students. I test them like this, and then I get them to reconstruct the text. I might read it one more time, and they can scribble it down like a dictogloss possibly, but I might not. And then their job is together to collaborate and rewrite the text. They need to know the text very well. And one way we can test their comprehension is by asking them to draw the photograph. Okay? So I'm going to ask you to draw the photograph, and this time I'd really like to draw it. But this is not an art class, this is a language class. So stick figures are fine. Okay? So you've got 1 minute, quickly sketch the photograph. Okay, so yes, you might find that there are some differences, especially with your students, that they may have misunderstood, and therefore the pictures come out wrong. So it's a really effective way of testing, as I mentioned. And unlike despite our preconceptions, most people don't mind drawing, provided that they are assured that it's not a work of art. Okay? So you praise their pictures, you have a laugh at some pictures. Kids obviously love doing it, but they spend far too long. Once you get them started with pictures, especially the girls, they want to rub out and fill in and then put that picture in hearts and stuff. And it can take ages. So just think about the time management aspect. You know, you've got 1 minute or 2 minutes. Encourage them to see that it's only a stick figure that you're after. Okay? Notice here we've got the mental image in our minds. You got it from my description, and now you're creating that image. So the mental image is being transformed into a physical image. Okay. So in a full lesson, this image is the centerpiece. We haven't seen the image yet. We've listened to it. We've had a test on it. We've drawn it. We're now going to reconstruct it, and we're not, because that will take 20 minutes. But I would actually get them to reconstruct the text. Perhaps they do this in groups, pairs or groups, and therefore they can help each other self-correct, fill in the details, etc. Okay? This is where we can now get into the textual analysis of the lesson, looking at the language itself. So I would give them the original. This is what I read out. And I read it word for word, and they can compare. Now, first of all, they compare to see if they got all the details. But then I would like to focus on the aim of the lesson. Now, Rasheen mentioned the birth certificate, the Cambridge exam, picture descriptions in the background and things like that. That's a possibility. You may find that there's language in the description which is, you know, did they use that language and did they use it correctly in their written descriptions? Perhaps you're focusing on something different. The green text there, what's the language there? Relative, that's right. It's relative clauses. Some of them are reduced, like aged and smiling, sitting on an old one, but then you've got some full ones like that was taken or who we met. So we'd be looking at the relative clauses, and that might be we then work on correcting their texts and looking at how they can use relative clauses in their texts, things like that. So it's a noticing activity. Okay. Finally, at the very end of the lesson, we would perhaps show them the photograph. Would you like to see the photograph?
Yes.
Yes? Well, you can't. Not yet. There is a surprise. There's something that perhaps you didn't anticipate with the photograph. What is the surprise? It's winter. No, it's not winter. The boat's in the street. No, it's not in the street. That's an unexpected place. It is in an unexpected place, that's correct.
Fairground.
It's in a museum? No.
Fairground pirate boat.
It's not a fairground pirate boat. I like the imagination.
It's in the second roundabout.
Inside of a roundabout. there's a boat right near my house in the middle of a roundabout, but no, it's not.
You said there were rocks on the floor.
It's not inside, so the floor on the ground.
Okay.
No? Okay, shall I show you? No, you haven't guessed yet, come on. In a harbour, close.
Is it on a beach?
No, it's not on a beach.
In the back of the
But you're warm. It's not in a restaurant, cold.
Is it next to
Cold.
On the back of the lorry, the boat.
Cold.
Is it wrecked or not?
Sorry?
Is it wrecked? A wreck or not?
Hot. It's wrecked. Where?
That's submerged and you're diving.
So there's a reason, and perhaps I might have explored the reason why we're not smiling. John's done the right thing and taken his regulator out of his mouth and is smiling, but we're not doing that. So there we go. So that's a question, and that's very much, that's definitely the idea of having that twist at the end is a Jamie idea. That comes from Jamie Cook's book, Images, and his image that he uses for this activity is a panda. And the panda is taking a picture of a little boy, he's taking a photograph. But we don't learn that it's a panda. We hear it's a Chinese photographer. So at the end, they find out that it's actually a panda.
So what's his name again?
Jamie KEDDIE, I'll put him on up at the end. I haven't got his book with me today. But... Okay. So there we go, that's a nice little twist at the end of the lesson that you could do. And you might find that you've got photographs that you could use, your own person. I like this because I'm a very personal teacher. I like to bring my life into my classrooms. Other people aren't so happy, but I'm sure you could find unexpected photographs like that online. Okay, good. We're just about to finish. So the third use is as a memory hook, and so we had the springboard into a lesson, the centrepiece. And one thing that really interests me, but I'm afraid I haven't really explored this in ATs, but I think it's a really valuable one, is this idea of images as a memory hook. If you've ever had done rolling intake classes, so I worked in London in multinational classes. In the summertime, we had 2-week turnover, so you have students for 2 weeks, and then they go, and then more ones will come. But there was always these students that had been around for months and months and months. And they're sitting there, and of course you've got these great lessons you want to do with the class. There's one kid who's just messing it all up for you. And so I'll sneak it in, I'll start it off in a different way, start it off and blah, blah, so okay, he's totally oblivious, he doesn't say, I've done this lesson already, he's just fine. But then the photograph comes up, and he goes, we did this already. The photograph is what we remember. We can use that to our advantage. We can use images to help students remember. Now, this particular lesson I did with my teens, and I saw them again a week later, and I got them to reconstruct the text with the relative clauses correctly used, simply by showing the photograph. And they remembered everything. Between them, they remembered absolutely everything, including the important bit, the bit I was secretly concerned about, which was the relative clauses, the who did this and aged that. They remembered the reduced relative clauses. So it was a very powerful way of recalling language. And I think that that's something that we could use a lot more. What did we do last week in class? Do you remember? Do you ever ask your students that question?
All the time.
And how often do they remember?
Every time.
Oh.
They got used to me asking every
Okay, so right, must remember. But my experience isn't like that. My experience, what did we do last week? What did we do? You know, there'll be one person that remembers, but what did we do last week? And everyone remembers.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful tool. I'm not sure I got it as a mnemonic, as a way of remembering things. I'm going to finish there. I could bang on a bit, but I'm not going to because it's now 1 o'clock and I know how precious our breaks are. So here is, for your information, the names. I forgot to do T's talking later today, Therese Bestwick, and she's another inspiration and teacher. And she's come up with lots of imaginative ideas, so I'd recommend her talk later on. Jane Arnold, a real unsung hero of TEFL with her mental images. She was based in Seville. Jamie Keddie's book reviews, and I mentioned the ELT bits as well. Okay. There's my email if anyone would like more information or details of bits and bobs, including the neuroscience bit. I've got the link to that as well if you're interested in the neuroscience. Okay, thanks very much for your time.